Guys, welcome to the fourth video in my game development series. So in this video, I'm starting off by saying that I've actually decided to switch the style of game that I'm going to be building. I'm switching from a action RPG to more of a semi-realistic zombie survival game, or at least as realistic as a zombie survival game can be. So there are numerous reasons why I'm making the switch. The biggest one, or I guess the biggest couple, um, would be one, I think that my skill set will probably lend better to me being able to solve the issues that I think I'm going to face in a zombie survival style game than an action RPG game. And that's not to say I think one is easier to build than the other, but I do think both of them have different sets of problems that you will need to tackle. Um, and I think it's just I'll have a better opportunity to kind of handle the problems that come with the zombie survival game. And both of these kind of game types I like just as much as each other. Um, so I have passion for both style of games. I also think I will like at best I'm a mediocre action RPG player, action RPG gamer. Um, and the chances of me making a very fun experience with an action RPG are probably not as good as me making a fun experience with a zombie survival game. So I think that's better. So as I'm developing, I think it will be a funner experience as I develop it, which I think will just give me more motivation. I also think that there aren't quite as many zombie survival games, at least the one that I'm planning to build, as there are action RPGs. Obviously, action RPGs, you've got some great ones out there, such as Grim Dawn, Path of Exile, Diablo 3, and even a lot of the older ones, such as Titan Quest or Diablo 2, Torchlight 2. I kind of still play it as well. So there's kind of a lot of good action RPGs. And while zombie survival games are pretty much a dime a dozen, the style that I'm going for isn't quite as popular um, with mainstream gaming. So I think that's just better overall. I don't have any realistic goals of releasing the game in any major fashion, but it's just nice. So the style of game I'm going for is going to follow a lot more closely with a game like Project Zomboid versus games like 7 Days to Die and DayZ and stuff of that nature. So it's going to be a 2D game. It's going to be a lot about just survival, fighting zombies, maybe avoiding zombies, depending on the situation. I do have different ideas as far as certain things I want to implement and certain ways I want to implement them that differ from Project Zomboid. I also want to focus on certain areas that I don't think Project Zomboid is focusing on currently, and I don't know when they will be. So I think there's enough differentiator that I want to kind of go for in this game compared to Project Zomboid. However, I will say that I will probably reference them a lot because a lot of the core mechanics are going to be inspired by that particular game. So let's go off and start up the game. So I've been spending the past couple weeks kind of refactoring a lot of the code that I wrote for the XRPG, and while a number of the uh, pieces of code I've been able to reuse, some I've had to just completely scratch, and others I had to do some pretty heavy modifications to kind of fit in line with the style of game that I'm going with now. So first up is the movement. So previously I would be able to click and kind of move around, and that doesn't do anything anymore. We are going with I'm going with a WASD style movement because this game's not going to have numerous skills and abilities for you to execute. It's pretty much anything you have in your hands is what you're going to be able to use. You're really only going to have a one weapon, maybe two weapons if you have two weapons in each hand. I'm not quite sure. And then you have like a push mechanic, which is separate from that. So I'm not as worried about being able to keep the hand free for like the number keys at the top and then allow you to move with the mouse. I'm actually want the mouse to be the primary way to attack and interact with objects in the game, and then have your hand free for doing movement and stuff of that nature. So we have all the different directions. You have your 8 cardinal directions that you kind of move in. And that's just through the WASD keys. So let's go ahead and let's spawn an enemy. Okay, so we have this dumb zombie, aka a pig. Um, So something that I've also added, kind of a new feature, is a field of view. So if we go ahead into our player and go into our field of view script, we turn on our gizmos, you can kind of see we have this blue box and this green triangle. The blue box is representing the area in which Unity is searching for objects. And the green triangle is anything that is actually visible to the user. Um, and this box kind of travels in whichever direction the character is moving in. So if I could click back in the game. So kind of any direction that I move in, it's going to follow that. And that red line is just kind of indicating a object that is visible to the user. So you will notice that the enemy is still visible. If we go ahead and we turn off this debug flag, you'll notice that the and clear that out, you notice that the enemy will slowly fade away. And that's because it's gone out of our view and now it's no longer visible. Very similar system in Project Zomboid. And once I am able to view it, it instantly comes back. We may have kind of a fade in effect, I'm not quite sure, but for the time being, it just instantly comes back. And so there's a little bit of fade and then it comes back. So that's kind of the basics of the field of view system. If we go back to our script, I mean there are numerous settings. We have a max search width, which is basically the side range, and we'll see that in a second. Let's just go out to the scene so you can kind of see this better. We have our max range, which basically says how far forward from the facing direction can we see, and you can kind of see as that gets larger, the the angle remains the same. So this is kind of independent of each other. And then as we make the angle wider or shorter, the distance remains the same as well. And at a certain point, the angle becomes, or the green triangle becomes larger than the blue box. So again, an item has to fall within both the blue box and the triangle in order for it to be visible to the user. Even if it's in the green triangle, if it's outside of the blue box, it's not being looked for, so it won't be visible to the user. And this is done with a bunch of fun trigonometry calculations. And since I suck at math, through the magic of Stack Overflow, I was able to get all the calculations I needed for this and make the necessary minor tweaks in order to kind of make it work for what I needed. And then the last thing in relationship to the movement is that let's just use that. So as you're moving, it kind of follows the direction that you're facing, but sometimes you may want to move backwards but look forwards. And Project Zomboid has the same feature. So what you can do is you can right click, and basically when you're right clicking, you're going to force on where your character is looking. So that way I can look at any particular place that I want to, but I can also move completely independent of where I'm looking. So that way I can move backwards while still looking in front of me. In case if a zombie is trying to come attack you and you want to just slowly back away from it to kind of separate it from the herd. So stuff of that nature you can kind of do with this mechanic. So the next mechanic that I've introduced is a push and stomp mechanic. Again, very similar to Project Zomboid. So if I get close here, you'll notice there's a color animation that's just kind of signifying an attack since I don't have any attack animations. And if we go ahead and open up the character screen, you can see that I'm taking slight damage every time it attacks me. One system that will definitely be changing is the health system. It won't be a point or a value based system. It's going to fall more in line with a realistic system, similar to Project Zomboid, in which you can get hurt in particular body parts. So if you get hurt in the leg, that may slow you down, and stuff will kind of heal over time. So you will have a overall health, but it's not going to be something hits you and you just take a flat value damage, and once you hit 0, you're dead. There's going to be more intricacies with that, as well as zombification and stuff of that nature that can happen if you get bitten or scratched and stuff of that nature. So this will have a much higher level set of features on top of just the pure value system. But as you can see, I keep taking damage. Now, if I were to hit the spacebar before that coloring animation stops, you can see I don't take damage. And this enemy doesn't move, so that's why it's a dumb zombie. So I don't take any damage. However, there is also and let's just turn this gizmo off. There's another feature um, with the enemies that every time I push them, there's a small percentage that the enemy will fall down. I think it's right now set to something like 30. And that means that they've fallen when they get to that color, or that solid color. It means they've fallen. So if I go ahead and do this again, and just... So if I now hit the same thing I was hitting to do the push, it actually is stomping and it's attacking them. If I do it enough times, it's going to go black, which just indicates that the enemy died. It came back to life because of a slight bug in the code, but that's fine. So let's just give him some life. And cool. So yeah, so that's kind of the stomp mechanic that's been introduced in the push mechanic that I've introduced into this prototype. So the next thing we're going to look at is the inventory. So first thing that I've done is that I've actually changed this window so that's draggable. So if you click anywhere outside of any other element that's actually designed to be clicked on, it's going to move that. It's going to just move the window to wherever you want. Inventory, as with any survival game, is a big part, and managing that inventory is a big part. So I want to make sure that there's the flexibility as far as putting this particular window wherever you want. The next thing that I changed within the inventory system is that instead of being a slot-based inventory system, it's not going to be weight-based. So every item will have a different set of weights, and based off your current weight, which can be negated with stuff like backpacks and stuff of that nature, similar to Project Zomboid, um, it's going to that's kind of like the way you kind of have to manage your inventory is through weight, not through the amount of slots. So if you find something in this house and you really want it, but you don't have enough weight, you have to make the decision if you want to leave it there and come back for it later, or drop something else, something along those lines. So that's why we have this weight system in here now. And if I were to go ahead and just spawn a couple of items, we'll do a handgun and a shotgun, a machine gun, and let's give us some stones. So again, the inventory as far as the main inventory slot functionality is pretty similar. It's probably going to be going away anyways, so I'm not terribly worried about that. But like I can move it here and I can click it and move it there. So all that sort of stuff still kind of works. Ultimately, I'm going to be moving to a more list-based system where it's just going to be a list top to bottom instead of this kind of grid slot-based system, where we'll have an icon, the name of the item, probably the type of the item, maybe a few additional characteristics of the item, whether maybe the weight will also be listed in this top-down list. Still haven't quite figured that out. And basically anything that you can see within the list, you'll also be able to sort by those values as well. So that's kind of how I intend for this to go, which is why I quickly prototyped the scrollability as far as the list is concerned, where you can kind of see we can scroll that. So yeah. And then let's just kind of maximize this. So yeah, there's a slight bug with the positioning of the tooltip not being consistent, but it is good enough for demonstration purposes. So we now have total weight as a item in the tooltip. And if I go here, we can see this is 2.3. The first one was 1.2, and then 3.1, which is 6.6. And then we have our weight of 0.8 for the stones, and you can also see the calculation that it does, that it's 0.08 per stone, you have 10 of them. I've played numerous games where you would have weight management stuff, and they would tell you when you ever had a stack of something, they would tell you what the single item weight is, but not what the total weight is, and you're just left to do the calculations on your own, which always annoyed me. So I definitely wanted to include the calculation here, as well as the single item weight. You will notice that this value is 6.2, and that's from the fact that I took this gun and I put it here, and it reduces the weight, which it should not be doing. So that's just a slight bug in the way the weight is being calculated. But if I go ahead, drag this guy down here, if I just spawn enough stones. Okay, so at this point we have 70 stones. I'm going to try to add 10. And you can only see it actually added 2. And that's because it hit that limit of the 10 with that third one, so it didn't add it and just kind of stopped. Now, ultimately, I believe I'm going to have a kind of a encumbrance type system where you can carry more weight than you're allowed to. However, that will come at certain downsides. One, you'll move more slowly. Two, depending on the amount of extra weight you have, you may risk injuring yourself. And I'm sure there's probably other things I can think of to kind of add to the negative side of carrying more weight than you're supposed to. So I think that's the bulk of the inventory changes. And the last thing I wanted to go over was the changes to the ranged weapons and kind of how ranged weapons work. If I go ahead and close that, and let's go ahead and drop my handgun in here, close the inventory. Well, there's another bug. Cool. So, okay, there's my dumb zombie. So previously, the way the ranged weapons work is they actually fired projectiles that were objects that actually had a visual effect, and anything basically used just collision detection of the projectile versus anything else it collided with to detect if it hit something. If it did particular damage. So what I'm switching to, at least for the time being, is going to be a projectionless way of doing this. And we're basically going to be reusing the field of view code to kind of determine the hit radius for our weapons. So if I go ahead into the gun and I turn on the gizmos, that works. And, oh, yeah. So I have to have the inventory open for this to kind of work, but that's just a existing bug. So you can see we have the same blue box and triangle, and it functions exactly the same. And if we take a look at our ranged weapon script, we have our angle, our forward range, which is similar to the range, and then our side range, which is similar to the max search width of the field of view script. So those functions the same properties. So now anything that's within both the blue box and the green triangle will have a chance to be hit by the weapon. And basically what it's going to do is anything that's within that range, it's going to apply different or a set of calculations depending on the weapon type that you're using to determine if something's been hit. Currently, it's set up to just hit anything that's within the confines of the field of view on the weapon. So if I were to go ahead and hit the 1 key, you can see it's taking damage and eventually goes black because that's the color I set it to when the enemy dies. But again, all of these different things can kind of be affected to kind of give. So if you wanted something that was a shotgun, maybe you would give it slightly shorter range, but you give it a much wider angle and stuff of that nature. So there's kind of each weapon type will have different characteristics that are based to that particular weapon. And I believe I will be adding in additional functionality where you're going to be able to mod a gun. So manually mod a gun, and that will give you the ability to make modifications to how these calculations or how these values here are calculated, so that maybe you can mod a gun so that you have further range, but it's or a shorter range, but it's a wider spread area of effect. Or maybe you can modify it so you have more bullets in the capacity as far as the gun before you have to reload. So stuff like that. And then you also have ammo that can apply additional tweaks and changes to the calculations that affect the outcome of what you hit, how much you hit it for, stuff of that nature. So I think that's gone over all of the different major changes that I've made to the game so far to kind of support this the new game going forward. Um, as always, if you have any questions, leave your comments below, and thanks.